Good evening and welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. I'm your host, Kim B. Davis, and this evening we have another fantastic guest on this evening. His name is Jahquan Hawkins. He is a college success coach, author, educator, and public speaker. Good evening, Jahquan. How are you?
Good evening, Kim. How are you? Doing well?
am great. I'm great. Thank you for being on the show tonight.
Appreciate you having me.
Not a problem. All right, so let's get to it. So tonight we are talking about college success, your business, what it is that you do. First off, I want you to introduce us to who you are, your business, all the things that you do, and why you are the expert for this topic.
Well, first and foremost, to become an expert in something, I believe that you have to fail at it dramatically. And so I have checked that box many a time over the course of my educational life. And we'll talk a little bit about that later, I'm sure, as we progress through the interview. But my name is Jahquan Hawkins. I'm a native Detroiter. As you mentioned, I have a passion for college success, and I've been working in higher education for a little bit over 15 years. In various capacities. I currently serve as the Dean of Student Services at Oakland Community College's Auburn Hills campus. And so it has really become my passion to ensure that students understand the commitment that it takes to be successful in higher education, and that they also understand that they're not going along the journey of completing their credential alone, that they have advocates, that they have resources that they can tap into, if they are simply open to being coached along that process. And so that has really spawned what I do outside of OCC, which is my college success coaching business. JahquanHawkins.com is where you can find me. That's JAHQUAN. Looks like Jahquan, but it's actually Jahquan. And their students, families can find out how I can be a resource to them in helping guide their student through navigating not just the process of getting into college, but more importantly, getting through college. We have too many students who enter the ranks of higher education, but never finish their desired journey. And so we want to make sure that we're increasing the number of college graduates and thus strengthening our workforce as well. And so I will stop there and I'll leave the rest to our interview.
Awesome. And I am so sorry. I'm always mispronouncing your name. Forgive me. It is Jahquan. You know, I got to say it correctly because that's how your mama gave you your name. So let me give all due respect. Thank you for that correction. All right. So you talked a lot about when students enter college and don't finish. And I'm going to save that. I'm going to put a pin in it because I do want to come back to that. But I specifically, one of the first questions that I want to ask you, we're in COVID. We're still in this pandemic. We've been here for 2 years. It has affected or impacted students going to college greatly. And I see a lot of people saying, okay, well, do I go to school because I'm going to end up paying the same amount of money that I would pay if I were physically on campus versus being at home? And so some people are saying, well, I'll wait and see. Talk about what the benefits of college are. We know what the benefits are. We both have college degrees. However, sometimes when you talk to people, they're like, well, you don't understand my situation. Talk about some of the challenges that young people are facing right now.
Well, I think that the challenges all come back to options. I think that's the challenge for all of us in life. The fewer options you have, the fewer opportunities you have to make a better life for yourself. And the more credentials that you're able to earn, the more skills you're able to put in your toolbox, then the more spaces you can navigate in this place that we call, life or the world, right? And so with that being said, there's never, in my estimation, a bad time to go to college, because guess what? There's never an awesome time to go to college either. College is one of those things, it's one of those roads that you have to take. To your options in life. And so with that being said, as we're navigating COVID, one of the things that I would recommend to families and students to consider as they're toiling with this or grappling with this issue of whether or not college is worth it, if you are not quite sure, start out at a junior college, start out at a community college, because it's a low cost opportunity for you to find out, A, what your niche is, what contribution you're going to make to the world around you, and how education connects to that pathway, how education connects to your why, how education connects to how you're going to raise your family and your, and how you're going to sustain a life beyond just yourself. And so with that being said, that's one of the nuggets that I would put in a student's toolbox this morning, or anyone who's listening, this evening, or anyone who's listening, is that you have to start out at your own pace. Not everyone's ready to go into a four-year university from day one, in particular during COVID, because you're not going to get the four-year university experience that we got and that the students 2 years ago got. Right. And so I am all about value. And being a parent, it will teach you about value if you don't know the value before you become a parent. And so with that being said, if it were my child, I would recommend that they start out at a junior college, kind of cut their teeth there, earn some credits. The same courses that you're going to take at University of Michigan, you can take at Washtenaw. Same course you're going to take at Michigan State, you can take at Oakland Community College. And they're going to be transferable to those institutions. And guess what? When you get your degree, it's not going to have an asterisk next to it. It's not going to have a caveat that says that you graduated from Michigan State by way of insert community college. Is going to have the credential of that particular institution on it. And so don't get caught up in the stigma of how you start. Get caught up in the fact that you are indeed starting, because in many cases, that's the most important step, is that you start. No matter where you start, make sure that you're moving forward always. And I think it starts with just making sound decisions from day one. If you're going to be in a remote environment, then you're probably better served starting out at a junior college, in my estimation.
Excellent points. And I know quite a few people who did that route, who started in junior college and had success, and then were able to navigate or, transfer their classes over to a larger university and truly have the experience they were looking for, but with maturity and the credit that came with whatever work that they had done at the junior college enhanced their experience. And many of them finally talk about how there were professors who were able to take them under their wing and help guide them to where they are today, which they may not have had in a four-year university, because four-year universities tend to be a lot bigger. So, once you get to a four-year university, and I don't know about you, Jahquan, but it took me a little bit longer than 4 years to figure out what I wanted to do. There were all these options, and I was just like, I don't want to do that. I knew everything I didn't want to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I know a lot of times there are all these conversations around what degree pays the best. And lots of times people will look at the monetary end of it and say, well, if you get this degree, you can get a job and you will make X amount of dollars. Is that a good way to pick a major, or is there a better way?
I'm going to go back to an old saying that my grandparents and my parents said to myself and my brothers on several occasions in several different contexts. And that is, mind the business that pays you. Too often we're looking to the left of us and to the right of us, what our friends are pursuing, what this magazine or this individual or this journal is saying is going to be a high-paying career in the next 5 to 10 years. And yes, it's important to look at market research to determine whether or not a career path that you're going to pursue is going to be viable. But what you and I both know, having been professionals for several years, is that you can make all the money in the world. You can make a great living for yourself. You can have a nice house. You can have a nice car. But if you're getting up every day, and in Michigan, guess what? We just had daylight saving time. You get up, it's dark. You come home, it's dark. And in the middle of all of that, guess where you are? You're at work.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do not like what it is you're doing day in and day out, then that can lead to all sorts of ailments, both psychologically and physically, more importantly. And so what I would tell a young person is mind the business that pays you, not just monetarily, but that feeds you and your soul. And I genuinely believe in that. Whether you are into the arts, you're into engineering, you're into mathematics, you're into medicine, whatever the case may be, if you are passionate about it, if it makes a positive contribution to the world around you, if it allows you to use both your left and your right brain and cultivate yourself as an individual and thus cultivating everyone that comes in contact with you, then it is a pursuit worth going after. It is an endeavor worth venturing on. If it is something that you're doing because your mother told you should do it, or your uncle told you it was a great career, or, then you're possibly living someone else's why. And that's a very dangerous space to be in. I was a pre-med student when I started out at Wayne State University many, many years ago because my mom wanted a doctor in the family.
Yes.
She said, one of my 3 sons is going to be a physician, and guess what? Tag you're it, Jahquan. It's going to be you. And my mother had never, God rest her soul, had never taken a college course in her life. And so as I'm starting along this journey and I'm taking biology and I'm taking mathematics and I'm on this path and I'm thinking to myself, not only am I not interested in this, I'm no good at it. And yet I'm making a financial investment, I'm making a psychological investment, and I'm making a physical investment in this career that has nothing to do with me. It doesn't have Jahquan written on it anywhere. That was something that my mother wanted. And it took a lot of courage to go home and say that I was no longer going to be pursuing that career path. And I think that that's what a lot of our students grapple with. I will say, though, our generation Yers, boy, they are a lot more courageous than we were.
Yes.
When we were their age, they are starting online businesses. They are looking at alternative ways to educate themselves. And they're really tapping into that creative, that inner creator that I think that we were afraid to tap into because it wasn't safe, and I think that there was a space and time for us to be safe, for us to do the 4 to 6 to 8 years, if you're me, and get your degree and go out and work and make a better living for yourself and your children and so forth. But I think today's generation, they are taking risks and they are living with the consequences. So time will tell whether or not that is a good thing or a bad thing, but it's surely inspiring to someone, a Generation Xer like me, who took a more traditional path. And I think we have to remind ourselves that we are not too far removed from our grandparents picking cotton, our grandparents not being able to, not having freedom. And so I think that, as Black people in particular, we can't be too hard on ourselves for not being moguls, for not being millionaires, for not, owning corporations and so forth. When we think about the progression that we've made over the course of the last 50 to 70 years in our culture, we should be proud of what we were able to accomplish. And we should also be encouraged by the courage that our young people are showing in their educational paths. It's really inspiring to me.
Excellent. You hit the nail on the head because my dad was an attorney. I was encouraged to go to law school or medical school. And my parents went through everything, but you like animals. You could be a veterinarian. I don't want to be a doctor. I have no interest. I don't even like hospital shows. So, when you watching TV, they're like, come watch a hospital. Like, no, it doesn't move me. I liked law, but not enough that I wanted to go through that process. not enough that I wanted to, work for the next however many years practicing law and grueling. That was not an interest to me. And so when you talk about that you had the courage to come back and tell your mom, sorry, mom, it's not going to happen, but this is what I'm going to do. Will you share a little bit of that process, what that sounded like for you? Because when you talk about courage, that one of the things that I say, because I'm a Gen Xer as well, we weren't given the opportunity to dream. It was about being practical. It was about making a living for yourself and being successful so that you didn't have to depend on anyone. And so then when we step out on faith and we're like, Mom, I want to write a book. You want to do what? That's right. What the rich kids do. What are you talking about? Who's going to buy your book? And, it becomes one of those things where you start talking to people and they look at you sideways like, that poor child don't have a job. That they, and Jahquan, when you go to a book fair and you're sitting there signing books and people look at you, do you have a day job? You're like, I do, but this is what I really am passionate about. And people are like, he's going to be broke for the rest of his life. He just, and it's interesting. So I want to talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that it's an excellent question and a very intriguing topic because it's scary to go in and say to your predecessors who sacrificed so much, right, for you to be in a position to win, that, you know what, I read the blueprint that you gave me, I read the playbook, but I think I'm going to follow a different path. And I can remember when I graduated, I had a degree in, so I'd gotten a degree in sociology from Wayne State University. And that was a degree program that more or less was just a path to graduation for me than anything else. I understood that I was going to have to further my education in order to really find viable, job opportunities out there. And I had realized at that point that I wanted to work in a higher education environment. So at least I had accomplished that much in the years that it took me to finish my undergraduate degree, right? And so, but I had some very well-intentioned mentors who really kind of guided me along that path to working in higher education, and I'm forever grateful for them. So when I went home and I told my mother that I was going to go to Illinois, and I'm a Detroit kid through and through, all the way from kindergarten, all the way through, through college. And I said, I'm moving to Illinois, 3 mama's boys, I'm the middle child, and I'm going to go and pursue this degree in higher education. And the first thing my mom said to me was, well, didn't you just complete a degree? Like, you should be going out there and trying to find a job. I know I've seen the late notices on your door, at your apartment. You need to go find a job. And I said, and I had to explain to her the process. And this is why I always tell students, you have to own your college degree process, your educational journey. You have to own it, because you're going to have a lot of people that are going to provide input, but many of which you care for. These are going to be your siblings. It could be a spouse. It could be, like I said, a mentor, a neighbor, whatever the case may be. But you're going to have to sit in the classes. You're going to have to stay up late to complete the assignments. You're going to have to interact with the faculty members, and you're going to have to pay for it. That Fannie Mae bill that comes in the mail is going to have your name and your social number on it, right? So if you're making the investment, then you're the CEO of that process. You're the CFO of that process. So yes, you have to use your filter to decide what information you're going to absorb and incorporate into your journey, and what information you're going to leave on the cutting room floor. And you have to be okay with living with those consequences. And so with that being said, that's sort of what the conversation felt like. It was sort of a coming of age moment for me as that middle-aged mama's boy from Detroit, to say, I'm physically moving out of state to pursue something totally different than what you thought was going to be my path to success. And it wasn't until she saw me working, coming back home to work for Wayne State University, and then leaving Wayne State to work at OCC and getting promoted several times within the OCC system, that she said, okay, wow, I'm seeing it all materialize. Like, he can actually go buy a house. He can actually have he has a family now that he's taking care of. And it became tangible to her that, what, I think that it's still right? We did a good job. We raised him right, and he's a productive member of society. And so, but interestingly, when you talked about the book really speaks to that journey. When I wrote Finding My Way in 2016, it was almost like a memoir for me, sort of recounting some of the difficult conversations I had and some of the difficulties I had as a student in undergrad, and sort of twisting that around toward this is the formula for success, or the formula for avoiding the pitfalls that I ran into when I was an undergraduate student. And so it was everything that I wish that as a first generation student, someone had sat me down in that summer of 1996 and said, this is what you're going to, or this is what you should expect when you go to college. This is what you're going to encounter. This is how you're going to have to navigate this hurdle. And yes, you're going to make mistakes, but you have this guide here to reference when you get off of your path. And so I was elated to be able to make that contribution. And yes, you do get some funny looks, especially as a Black author, because we underestimate how few books are out in the world that are written by Black authors. When we go to book fairs, because we're in that network, we see each other, but to the greater society, we're just a microcosm of the total aggregate number of authors out there, right? And so that's something to be celebrated, and it's something to be appreciated. Whether you sell one book or you sell 1 million books, I think that the contribution that you make is still significant to everyone who reads it, everyone who comes in contact with it.
Absolutely. You're right. And Jahquan, I know that when people walk up to your table at a book fair or a book event or where you're speaking and tell you how your book has impacted their life, how that makes you feel proud, because you feel like, wow, I've made a difference with someone, not only in the work that I do, but in the creating of the words and sharing of advice that I've given to the world in the form of this book.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't trade it, because I see empowerment when I see students who come back and give me positive feedback about the book. I see empowerment when a parent says, thank you, because I didn't know what to say to my child about the college going process because I didn't engage in the process myself. I see empowerment when I encounter a high school student who says, now I feel a little bit more confident going to insert whatever university or college now that I have read your book. And so when you're able to empower others, then you have more than a book, you have a movement.
Yes.
And, I see Michelle Obama's book to your right,
yes,
my left.
Yes.
And I think and I think about how she mobilized an entire nation of women in particular, but Black women into feeling empowered by reading the material that she was willing to share. She opened up herself, she opened up her life, she opened up her household for the sake of allowing others to feel empowered. And so that's so inspirational to me as an author, and just as a citizen of this country, that someone is willing to make that type of sacrifice. And I think that's what we do, because everything that we write, everything we put out for public consumption is open for criticism.
Yes.
And a lot of folks aren't willing to accept or take that criticism. And what happens is they get stagnated. They allow it to stunt the process of them creating, because they don't want the backlash. They don't want the critiques. They don't want the negative press. And when you're willing to push through that and publish anyway, then you have made a tremendous sacrifice, and you've made a significant contribution to the world around you. So I applaud you, my sister, my fellow author, for publishing books yourself.
Thank you. And I applaud you, Jahquan. So I want to go back to something you said. You talked about being a first generation college student in your family. And that is an amazing and an admirable feat. But we know that there are lots of people that struggle with that. What are some things that can help a first-time college student to graduate? Because we're going to talk a little bit about that. But what are some things that can help get them in the door, that can help to stabilize them once they're at college so that they are able to stay and thrive?
Well, I think that's a very important question. And one of the things that I would point your audience to is a chapter in my book called How Strong is Your Squad? Mm-hmm. And the squad is a transitional thing, as we know, because as we go throughout life, the people that we surrounded ourselves with in high school are not necessarily the same people that we surround ourselves with as college students and obviously as adults that are out in the workforce and so forth, right? And so your squad is an ever evolving entity, but I challenge students to look at and evaluate their squad, their team, their network on a regular basis. And so as you're making the transition from high school to college, or if you're a returning student and you're in the workforce and you're returning to college, I challenge you to look at the individuals that have the most influence in your life and ask yourself a series of questions, including which, are these individuals going to help the process of me becoming a college completer, or are they going to hinder the possibility of me becoming a college completer? And if you're honest with yourself, then you'll know whether or not you need to make a cut, whether you need to make a trade, whether you may need to make a total transition from one individual to another, because success and failure cannot occupy the same space at the same time. And people who breed failure, people who breed discontent, people who breed doubt and fear cannot live in the same space that your encouragers do, cannot live in the same space that your inspirers do, right? And so eventually, once you get a taste of people that are inspirational, people that are strong, people who are vulnerable, people who pull you up as opposed to pushing you down, then you will no longer have time or energy for individuals who do the opposite. Absolutely. And so if you're truly evaluating your squad and your team, then that transition will be a little bit easier for you. And I think that that's one of the biggest indicators as to whether or not you're going to be successful, even more so than your SAT scores, more so than your college entry exams, more so than how you perform on your first test. It's how you're able to navigate the people who have the most influence in your life. That could be your instructors. It could be a tutor. It could be your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your family members. But if you have people around you that make you stronger and make you a better student, then guess what? Failure is not going to be an option, because they become accountability partners as well. And if you have folks that are holding you accountable, you know when the camera is on, there's a certain way I'm going to sit, there's a certain way I'm going to talk, there's a certain way I'm going to present myself as an individual. I cannot relax because this person's pushing me and that person's pushing me, and I have to move forward, because if I fail, I cannot look that person in the eye and say that I have given up. But that all starts with you evaluating your circle and making very prudent and very intentional decisions about who you allow within your nucleus.
You know, that is such a great point, because the old line that says, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And so if you're hanging around people who aren't doing anything, aren't trying, just hanging on the street corner, guess what? That's most likely where you will end up. Or it's going to make it a lot harder for you to get where you're going to, because these people, as you said, are going to be holding you back rather than pushing you forward. Which brings me to mentorship. And you talked about that. You said that you had great mentors. I know a lot of college students are struggling trying to figure out, okay, I got to take classes, I got to work, I've got to study, you know, I have family responsibilities, I need to get an internship. when do I have time to get a mentor? And is there a website? Is there an app for that? Because the Gen Y, they have an app for everything. So
everything.
For everything. So
Yeah, and this is one that I would push back on if someone were to tell me that they didn't have time to find a mentor. I'm in the process of actively pursuing a business mentor as we speak. And I have a whole family. I have a job. I have 2 businesses, and and I still have only 24 hours in a day, but it's still something that I find valuable enough to pursue. And so if someone were to say that they don't have time to find a mentor, then I would ask them if they have time to truly pursue their goals, because no one does it on their own.
That's right.
No one does it on their own. I was just watching an interview with Kanye West, and he was talking about everything under the sun because it's Kanye West, right? He can't stay on one particular track. But one of the things that he mentioned throughout the interview, as narcissistic as we deem him to be, is that there were several people who positively impacted his path along the way. And he gave credit to those individuals throughout the interview. And I was like, wow, if this guy, the guy that, probably wakes up and just looks at himself in the mirror and just smiles for 30 seconds before he starts the day, if he can say, yeah, this person really contributed to this project, and that person I really admire because they do X, Y, and Z, and this, that, if he can do that, then surely, as we are trying to work along our path toward becoming that billionaire, toward becoming that best-selling author, toward becoming that CEO or CFO of this company, toward becoming the president of the United States, if we along that path cannot identify mentors, then we're doing something wrong. We're following the wrong blueprint. And it took me being on academic probation. It took me almost getting kicked out of Wayne State University. It took me losing 2 academic scholarships and my financial aid as an undergraduate student to figure out that there was no way I was going to get from point A to point B without several different individuals contributing to that process. And I was humbled. Through that process. And I think we all have to be humble enough to say, you know what? I don't know it all. I don't have it all figured out. Can you help me? Can you answer this question? And it's not, I think sometimes we have a phobia about doing this because we feel as if we're latching on to someone else's strength. But it's okay, because the question is, are you latching on to stay there for the remainder of your life? Or are you latching on because you're lost, and that person knows how to get you around that corner to a point where you now know where you're going? And then you can hop off and keep walking along that path, right? It's only if you're going into that relationship with the intention of never getting off the train that you're on an ill-intentioned mission, right? You can talk to any fitness trainer, for example, and what they will tell you during the first consultation is that I don't want you to hire me to be your trainer for life. I want you to hire me until you get to the point where you no longer need me. Then I have done my job.
Exactly.
That's mentorship. That's mentorship, because at that point, you become the empowered, and guess what you need to do? You go back and you train somebody else. Yes, this is how I lost 50 pounds. This is how I got my 6-pack abs. This is how I was able to run this full marathon. Let me pass this information along to somebody else that I see crawling right now. And so with that being said, there's always time in that 24 hours to reach out to a mentor and ask for assistance. I will never waver from that ideology.
Wisdom. That was wisdom right there, guys. You just heard it live here on the Kim B. Davis Show. Okay, so we got a couple more questions because our time is moving really quick. So Jahquan, what happens? Kids go to college, all good intentions. They've got their credits. You know, you can see the end. You can see it. But then something happens. You get stuck. Like you said, you might lose your financial aid. It might get reduced. Family problems, life happens, all kinds of things. And you make the decision, you know what, I'm going to take a break and I'm not going to go to school. And I can say that for myself. There were some things that happened and I took a break. That break turned into several years before I got back. And oftentimes we hear people say, oh, we got to help kids or students graduate. But sometimes I don't think that we understand some of the challenges that students have. What are some things that you see right now, especially in COVID, that are challenges that are barring students from graduating? And are there some ways to help them overcome that?
Now, that's an excellent question, because being at a community college and having graduated from a commuter college, I've seen students who've dealt with all sorts of challenges. You know, I had a good friend in undergraduate that I hung out with. I actually took a couple of classes with. We worked in the same department on campus, and he would stop and start quite frequently. It was almost a semester to semester thing as to whether or not he was actually going to be able to enroll for classes. And I later found out that he was in and out of the correctional system for things that he was doing that he thought was his path to success as far as earning money. And I said, wow, that was really eye-opening. Even a kid from the west side of Detroit, I'm like, because I see this guy working just as hard as any other student. So on one side, he felt like, yes, this is my path out of the life that I'm currently involved in. But then on the other side, I have these current obligations that require that I still be engaged with this illegal activity, right? And so he was always caught between those two worlds, trying to figure out, do I want to be a college student or a street guy? You know, and do I want to go out and get money now, or am I willing to make a sacrifice for delayed gratification later on? And that's when I realized that our students are dealing with real life issues day in and day out. And it impacts them physically, it impacts them psychologically. Our students today, especially trying to navigate COVID, are dealing with a myriad of psychological issues. Be it firsthand because they themselves have been isolated, they themselves have had a difficult time navigating remote learning, and it's impacted their self-esteem. Or they're dealing with it secondhand from a parent or a loved one who's either been impacted by COVID or is taking care of someone who is impacted by COVID. And so there's a lot of compounding issues that are impacting students' ability to be successful in the classroom. And what I would recommend to them is to be honest with themselves. And sometimes it takes having a conversation with someone, because you know, a lot of our students are resilient. I see the resilience in them. I see them not quitting. I see them not wavering. I see them continuing to press forward, but it's sometimes at their peril, because you can see them slowly deteriorating in front of your eyes as it pertains to their ability to muster up the energy and the effort to put forth their best effort, right? You see C work where you know that person has a potential to give you A work, right? And so what I would say to that person is have an honest conversation about what it is you can handle. You know, like you said, when you had to take a pivot in your educational path, I'm sure you sat down with yourself, and then you probably sat down with someone else and you said, okay, what is it that I can handle at this point in time, given all the circumstances, and what do I have to take off of my plate at this point in time? And, you know, although you may not have anticipated taking that long to get back into the stride, you knew eventually you were going to go back. Mm-hmm. And I think that, one of the things that I talk about in the book and I talk with students about all the time is beginning with the end in mind. Mm-hmm. And so goal setting is very important in what happens when you take a pit stop, right? Mm-hmm. It's no different than if I'm a NASCAR driver and I know I've got to do 400 laps around this track. I know that before I start the race, right? But it doesn't stop me from stopping in the pit stop and getting gas. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got to complete the same 400 laps. I want to be first, but in order for me to be first, guess what I got to do? I have to have fuel.
Yes.
So when you're stopping and you're taking time to be with the loved one that's sick, to raise your children, to just recharge your psychological batteries, you're refueling. But you're refueling for the purpose of completing your 400 laps. And when you know that you still have 256 to go, 198 to go, 75 to go, 26 to go, 1 lap to go, then guess what? You're still inching closer toward the finish line. And I always tell students, you're not racing against anyone. That's the beauty about this race called college, right? Is that it's self-paced. The people who finish first are the people who finish strong. It's not about when you finish, it's about how you finish. And that's what I would encourage our students to wrap their minds around, is that you're not racing against anyone. And that's why I said I'm so encouraged by our young people, because they're not looking over their shoulder at everyone else's path. They're saying, this is what's best for me. And I'm going to put my energy, time, and effort into what works best for me. It may not work, but that's where I'm going to veer my energies. And so I would just encourage students to take the pit stops they need to take, but have an end date for that pit stop, because you still have some laps that you still need to navigate before you can finish that race.
Excellent. Okay, last question. As a college success coach, what is a great piece of advice that you would give potential college students and current college students, whether it be the same thing or two different?
I would tell our aspiring college students to truly evaluate whether or not college is for them. And that begins with identifying what it is they want to do with their lives for the next, I would say, 15 years, because I don't think anyone goes into college knowing what they want to do for the rest of their lives, right? But if you were to chunk it in 15 years, so by the time you're 32, you will have accomplished X, Y, and Z. What does that look like for you? 18-year-old Jahquan or 18-year-old Kim, right? What does that look like for you? And I think that when you break it down that way, then you're making very intentional decisions at that point about how the decision you make at 18 is going to impact your life at 32 or 27 or 23, right? And so if you were to say, for example, I think that I'm not quite sure if I want to go to a 4-year university, then I would encourage a student to go to a junior college. If you said, I think I want to pursue a degree in engineering, I would say consider a junior college, because you can still pursue a degree in engineering by starting out at a community college. But you first, before you even navigate that process, before you even apply to an institution, I want you to sit down with someone who works in the top 2 to 3 fields that you're considering and have a very in-depth conversation about what it is their life is like. What's their home life like? What is their work-life balance like? And what do they appreciate most about the work that they do? And that's your market research. It's not, necessarily, yes, you can look at the scholarly information that's out there, but I want you to sit down with somebody that is a reflection of you, 15 years from now and have a conversation with them about what it is their life is like working in that field. There's no better tangible piece of information you can get than someone's firsthand experience working in that field. And that's what I would encourage our aspiring college students to do. Our current college students, once again, mentoring is critically important. I would encourage them to actively pursue a mentor as soon as possible, someone that they have within arm's length on that college campus. That if they need to go and cry on a shoulder, they can go cry on that shoulder. If they need to go and vent, they can go and vent. If they need a resource or a letter of recommendation, they can go get that letter of recommendation. There needs to be. I subscribe to the ideology of in loco parentis, in place of parents. It's a Latin term. And when our students leave their households, leave their hometown, leave their neighborhoods, and they land on our campuses, we have a responsibility to nurture them, to help them grow, to help them develop. And we have a lot of folks who have open arms, just waiting for someone to come into their office and say, hey, I need help. I see it every day in higher education. But just because that person is older than you, just because that person has more experience than you, just because that person is more credentialed, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be walking out with a billboard that says, hey, I want to mentor someone. You as the student have to initiate that conversation, initiate that relationship, and actively pursue it with the same vigor that you're pursuing your goals, because that person is going to be directly attached to the path that you're taking to reach that goal. And so that's what I would recommend to our current college students, is to actively pursue mentoring in various forms.
Excellent, Jahquan. This has been a fascinating conversation. This is why you're our expert. I knew you were the expert, but I just needed you to explain it. Thank you so much for being on the Kim B. Davis Show. Before we go, tell us where we can one.
Okay, so you can find me at JahquanHawkins.com. That's JAHQUAN Hawkins, just like it sounds, .com. You'll be able to find both of my books on that website, as well as information about how you can book me for speaking engagements. That's Finding My Way, a practical guide to college success, as well as Donovan's College Adventure for our young scholars. And so I look forward to connecting. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Jahquan Hawkins. Reach out to me, connect to me through my direct message, and I look forward to connecting with your students as well. This has been an amazing conversation this evening. All right, so Donovan's College Adventure and Finding My Way, you can find at JahquanHawkins.com, JAHQUAN Hawkins.com. I also have my Authentically Dope apparel along with Born a King and Born a Queen. We are celebrating our heritage and our lineage as kings and queens. You can find that at jchapparel.com. Check us out. We also have holiday hoodies available as well. jchapparel.com for all of your holiday shopping. Cover yourself with positive vibes. Thank you so much for having me this evening.
Thank you, Jahquan, for being on the Kim B. Davis Show. We look forward to having you on again to continue this conversation, because, you know, education is such an important part of our world and our development, and it is definitely something that puts you on the other side of success. So thank you for being here. Thank you guys for tuning in to this week's episode. I hope that you will turn into our next episode. Remember, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat, TikTok, and Kimberly, Bachelor Davis. Bachelor is spelled Batchelor Davis. You can see this show live on youtube.com/Kimberly Bachelor Davis. You can also listen to the show on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google. You can find out more about me as an author at kimbdavis.com. Thank you guys for tuning in again. I hope you'll tune in for our next show. And as always, remember, be magnificent.